there are two things which happen, Siddharth. One is either he knows it already and he comes from reference, right? So there, then it's very easy thing, right? And in education, reference has a huge role to play. So as and when we are scaling, the references also scale. So that's a definite thing. So that is why it's important to give a great experience, because if you do that, one student will actually go and influence 5 others, right? So that's the organic way to do it, right? Which also happens in offline. So nothing specific with online there. It is everywhere. The same phenomena works. Apart from that, in online, what we have done specifically is we have made the friction to experience our product least. So it's almost a frictionless experience. You can, as a parent and a student, can actually today download a Vedantu webinar app and can actually go through a live session. It will be happening even right now. You can go and witness it. So there you will see a quality of the teacher. There you will see the content quality and also the platform seamlessness. And we give a lot of these free trial classes, like sessions. So what it does is it creates an experience and a comfort and a knowledge about how the Vedantu works. And after that, we have online demos. So parents who would want to, dig in deep and know more details, we have online demonstrations wherein a sales counselor would get into an online demo with a parent and explain the whole thing. So all of this is online. So it's frictionless. You don't have to travel anywhere. You can sit at your home and still go through it. And that's how we are able to scale these things, at a very massive level.
This is Siddharth Alwalia. Welcome to the 100x Entrepreneur Podcast. This episode is brought to you by Prime Venture Partners, an early stage VC fund led by Amit Somani, Shripati Acharya and Sanjay Swami. Prime is often the first institutional investor in category creating tech startups in fintech, SaaS, healthcare, and education such as EasyTap, MyGate, and SignUp. To know more about Prime, visit primevp.in. Today, we have with us Vamsi Krishna, founder of Vedantu. Vedantu is an Indian online learning platform where teachers provide education to students over internet. They have made a mark in K-12 learning so that all of India today knows Vedantu. Their jingle, Samajh Aayega to Maza Aayega, has been really popular over the internet. And Vedantu's journey is very inspiring. Vedantu recently joined the Unicorn Club after raising 100 million in Series E, led by Singapore-based ABC World Asia, Tiger Global, and GGV and Westbridge. Welcome, Vamsi, to 100x Entrepreneur Podcast.
Thanks, Siddharth. Lovely to be here.
Vamsi, we would love to know about your journey, right, before you started Vedantu.
I've been in entrepreneurship for a long time now. So before even starting Vedantu, I had my first venture, which was also in education, incidentally, and which me and my founders began way back in 2006. So we're all 2005 graduates. I am from IIT Bombay. My friends are from IIT Roorkee. In fact, the friendship goes even before that. So sort of like all of us knew each other. And we didn't last long in jobs though. We probably were like some 8 or 9 months into a job and then decided to do something together. And just after 1 year, in 2006, is when we started in our entrepreneurial journey. So the first venture was by the name of Lakshya. This was a 100% brick and mortar offline venture. And it was a bootstrapped entity, very different from Vedantu, right? So in that previous one, there's no investor, nothing. It was a bootstrapped one. I should also say that startup ecosystem at that time was not as evolved as it is today. So I could also see that whole change in the ecosystem. Lovely to see that. But yes, to your point, my startup journey began in 2006. And since that time, I've been entrepreneur.
And what happened to Lakshya?
It's a very incredible journey. I think all the things I today know about pedagogy, teaching, learning, I've learned from that. So it's been a long 8 years journey, very purposeful, very satiating. The thought of Vedantu and the challenges around Lakshya came about in 2010 and 11 when we scaled that offline venture. And while scaling, we discovered that scaling an offline center isn't easy. It has its own set of challenges. A lot of issues around maintaining quality, uniform quality across multiple locations and so on and so forth, right? And all the locations we had were tier 2 and tier 3, right? And there were a lot of issues around getting quality teachers in those locations. So all these challenges, right, made us realize two things. One is, if we continue to do like this, it will take 100 years to create impact at scale, right? And technology probably is a solution we can use to solve these problems. And that's really what got us to think about technology and then Vedantu. And then 1 year we tried to do both, then realized that can't do both. We have to focus on one. And it was a very tough call. It was a very cash-rich business, generating a lot of cash and all. So it was very, tempting to stay there. But impact at scale was the goal. So we ultimately decided to focus fully on Vedantu. So we got a good exit. So we sold it to a public listed company in 2012, based out of Mumbai. So this is a public news, and served on the transition for 2 years before starting Vedantu in 2014 officially.
And what was the different that you wanted to try this time in Vedantu that you couldn't try in Lakshya?
It's a quite a good question you ask, right? So a lot of things were same. I think the problem statement was very clear. We wanted to create an online version of Lakshya. So Lakshya was very successful in terms of learning outcomes and results. In fact, there have been multiple case studies on Lakshya in that regard. We just wanted to create an online scalable version of that same thing. So one of the big design choices we took in Vedantu was, we were the first company in India to start with live interactive classes, live classes, which today is obviously mainstream when we are doing this, even this talk on this. But way back in 2014, it was a very new concept, especially for teaching and learning. And 4G was not there, 2G, 3G was there. But our belief was, it's not just content which does the trick. It is that whole service level around interactions, motivation, doubts, a lot of these things which goes in creating a superior learning experience and an outcome. And we have seen that happening at Lakshya very successfully, right? We wanted to create a solution which has the same components as Lakshya, but in an online and a scalable fashion. And hence Vedantu was born. So in that sense, the problem statement we wanted to solve was very simple. How do we create a scalable version of Lakshya, wherein the best of the society, the great passionate teachers who are not available everywhere, we can get them and give them a platform and a tool so that they can reach out to all tier 3, tier 4 or whatever location is possible, right? So that was essentially the kind, the problem statement we're trying to solve.
And can you share the initial years of Vedantu when you were not funded, and who was your exact target audience? Right now, Vedantu is present across the entire K-12.
I clearly remember those days, when at the start, we also didn't know whether this will work or not. So we had exited, so we had put in our own money. So the whole thought process was that let's first try to do it in a small scale. And if it works, then we'll think about scaling it. So we started with pure one-to-one teaching learning. So one teacher teaching one student is what we started with. And for almost 1.5 years, we just did that. In that, we chose only math, and in that too, probably only 2 grades, which was, I think, 9th and 10th. Yeah, right, The reason why we chose 9th and 10th is because it was not as rigorous as 11th and 12th, where it's almost like a matter of high stakes for the kids and the parents. So there we felt that they would not try a new thing, right? And 9th and 10th hence, came about where people were ready to experiment. And also there was enough seriousness to think about it, in a serious way. So that was the initial, TG, if I have to use the word, target group we sought, and one-to-one is what we started with, and did that for almost 1.5 years. We tried looking at how's the experience, is the retention going to come or not, are they going to come back next year? And education is academic year cycles, right? So it was all of these things were important. After we saw in 2016 people coming back, right? An NPS of the tune of almost 82 across the sessions was amazing NPS, right? That is when we started thinking about, okay, now how do we scale this? Because Vedantu at that time, at a one-on-one tutoring fashion, was very expensive. We were operating at almost 500 rupees per hour, which was very expensive for India.
So and then we started. Was the student paying for a 500 rupees per hour cost?
Student was paying 500 rupees per hour.
Okay.
Okay, how much as in like how many hours? So there were packages. You can purchase 10 hours, you can purchase 25 hours, you can purchase 50 hours like that.
Yeah.
And per hour, it's 500 rupees, right?
And you used to pay, let's say, a teacher 200 to 300 rupees per hour. So there was the rest was the arbitrage.
Exactly. So we used to pay teachers almost 350 to 350, 400 rupees per hour. So that was also another challenge around scale. The margins for the business was so low, it was essentially 20%. And in 20%, in education, it's very low margins. I mean, I know in other businesses, 20% is a huge margin, but not so much in education, right? So all these are challenges. So again, the thing, Siddharth, is this, right? And this is also something which I tell to entrepreneurs, right? So when you think about some solution, first validate whether it works or not, right? And if it works, then you will always can think about scaling it, right? Many people think about scale first, and then they are not even able to come out with a product construct in the first place, right?
Yeah.
So here we first came out with a product construct. Our big question was, will a child be comfortable studying online? Will a teacher be comfortable studying online? We first proved that. And when we were satisfied with that, people are ready to pay, people are ready to come back, that's when we then went out and thought about like, how do we scale this? And then one-to-one, we cracked the model for one-to-few, in which one teacher will teach few students. And then ultimately one-to-many, in which one teacher will teach many students. This happened in quick successions. 2016, we did one-to-few. 2017, we did one-to-many. And since then, there's been no looking back. So in one-to-many, we got the price point down to almost 100 rupees per hour from 500. And the margins for the business improved to almost 60-65% from 20%. So that was a substantial improvement. And then it's been a massive scale journey since then.
And when did you raise your first round of funding, and from whom for Vedantu?
Being, having exited Lakshya, we obviously had our own fund. So we substantially invested our own money in this, right? And then we had our first angel, right? Who sort of like invested along with us way back in 2013-14 itself, right? The first institutional investment happened in 2015, almost first quarter itself. I would say, ours is probably a little different story and journey, because we were like second-time entrepreneurs, successfully exited. So we were known in the ecosystem, and hence the investors knew us. So I would say just 4 months into the launch, we got funded by Axel and Tiger, came in with a $5 million check in 2015. And funding and money, at least for Vedantu, was not a challenge to begin with. Rest everything was a challenge, but yes, at least, thankfully money was not.
And can you share your example when you took time to validate the one-to-many model, and when did you hit the hyperscale, and what helped you scale both organically and inorganically?
Yeah. So one-to-one, then one-to-few, and one-to-many happened in transition. When one-to-many happened, these things have price point came down, and also the margins improved. And because of that, it automatically scaled massively. So, I mean, obviously when you have a right product at the right price point, the adoption automatically increases, right? So in 2017 is when we did that. And since that time, I think Vedantu has always grown almost 2.5 times year on year minimum, right? And COVID has obviously accelerated it. It grew by 4x in COVID times. But even before COVID, we were growing at 2.5 to 3 times, year on year. And that continues even till date. Even right now, we are going at a 2.5 to 3x, year on year. Now, what really contributed to that? See, a lot of things in no particular order, right? First and foremost was the value proposition itself. In a tier 2, tier 3, even if you're ready to pay money, you're going to get access to a good quality teacher, right? So here you had the best of the teachers from the country teaching with you at a price point which is lower than the offline price point. So the value proposition itself was very, very, strong, I would say, right? That's one. Second is, traditionally, we have always built and believed in this concept and build a lot of organic funnels of acquisitions. So think of content. So we put a lot of solution to books, NCRT solutions, tests, all that on our website, and made it SEO optimized. So that used to get a lot of traffic to us organically, right? Then in 2017-18, we started with our YouTube channels. So today, obviously, we are the largest in K-12 and YouTube in India. right? Combined, but that was something we started way back in 2017-18. So all of these things combined used to generate, I don't remember exactly at that time, maybe around 10 to 12 million unique traffic of students coming to us organically. And that was ultimately, one of the big levers through which we were able to acquire users and convert.
And if you can share the revenue milestone, like what would be the current revenue of Vedantu, and what has been the journey of the revenue reaching to this stage?
Sure. As I said, I think the growth rates I did mention to you. Yeah. Those were the things. So today, we would be around a $65 to $70 million kind of like a annualized revenue run rate, right? That's our top line. This was 3 times. So this is 3x of what we were probably same time last year, right? As I said. So yeah, growth has been good. Growth has been great. And last year itself was 4x of the year before, right? So growth has been like pretty stellar. In terms of students also, same very similar growth. I think last entire academic year, which is FY21, yeah, we had around 2 lakh students, paid students with us, unique. The year before was around 48,000. So that again is a 4x kind of an increase we saw. This year, the way it is going, again, expecting a 2.5x, so probably around 500,000, we should be looking at this year. That's on the paid students. In terms of free students, also very similar metrics, right? So that, I hope that answered your question, but that is typically the kind of scale we are in and also the kind of trajectory we have had. COVID obviously had a role to play in it. But again, the point being is, Edtech in India was any which ways, strongly growing. Even before COVID in 2019, I remember we were growing at 2.5x, 3x year on year. So COVID has only accelerated it. And yeah, very happy with the kind of journey we have had, but still a long way to go. There's so much penetration, so much students still there who are not yet online. And very excited to see how this pans out for the next few years.
So I want to check, what are the systems that you built, right? You being an previously operated an offline business, and you would have adopted many systems from the offline business, in especially teaching methodology. And what are the new systems that you built that help you, reduce churn to minimum and build a huge system for growth so that you could handle when new students came along?
Yeah, so it's a very important thing, this building systems as you scale, and you are never optimized on that, right? So it's always like catching up or stuff. But so technically what I'm saying is there's no right formula here, right? It really is a function of lot of things, function of also the stage you are in, the kind of growth you are in, also the money you have, right? And so on and so forth. So there is no set formula. I can tell you my journey at least, right? So Siddharth, with us, we were very conscious of the fact that we know how to run an educational company. I mean, all the founders have been teachers. We've been like teachers now for almost more than a decade now. Even at that time, we knew all that. So many things came very naturally to us. Like, for example, what does it take to really create a good experience? What do you look for in a teacher? How do you recruit a good teacher? All those things was pretty natural. And that came obvious to us, right? Now, in order to do that at scale, needed a lot of systems to be created, right? So our approach is very, very simple here. So few of the things which are very critical for the core service to happen, we invested on that very early on. So for example, our live teaching learning platform, which we call internally as Wave, right, was the first thing we started developing way back in 2014 itself, right? It was the first thing we did, yeah, because we felt that if this is there, everything will happen. If this isn't there, then having anything and everything doesn't really matter, right? So that was the first thing. So we invested a lot on the Wave, right? Even continue to still invest. Right? That's one. The second thing is then, because you're always capital constrained and resource constrained, we started thinking about what all things can we integrate, right? And what all things do we need to build as our core competency? So there were a lot of conscious choices we used to make before. And we tried to do maximum integrations than actually building things. We'll only build stuff which was core to us, right? And maximum other things we'd probably integrate other third-party tools and try to make this work, right? So it's a tricky choice between speed and also core competency, and an entrepreneur and founder needs to continuously make it. So that's how we went about it. Later on, how we used to go about further, down this journey when we went about scaling and all, how we used to think about is first we'll throw people at the problem, and then we will see that, how is it working? Is it even working or not? Like what kind of profile do you require? And so on and so forth. And after that, a second thing is then we create process and then we create a product. So that's typically how we go about it, right? First, throw people at the problem, then create a process around it, and then create a product around it. So that's typically the approach we have followed around scaling. And yeah, it's worked us for us so well so far.
And can you share about the different verticals Vedantu has today? And did you create everyone through the same process, put and then processize this?
In terms of verticals, we have 3 broad verticals today at Vedantu. So the first one is the early years, which is 4 years to 8-year-olds, in which we have co-curricular courses for the kids. Then we have a tuition vertical, which is from 4th grade to 10th grade, which is the standard equivalent of offline mom and pop tuition centers and coaching centers. And the third one is what we have as test prep, which is for the engineering entrance, medical entrance examinations, right? So these 3 verticals, we obviously went one by one. First started with the tuition, then added test prep, and then added the early years, as we call it. So it was very sequential. And the way we go about it is obviously we have a playbook around it. So once we create a playbook, then we're essentially trying to replicate the playbook across multiple verticals as and when you go and create it.
And in current scenario where we have heard the cost of acquisition today has become like 20,000 rupees per paid user in Edtech, right? How do you balance that, and what would be this same cost for you?
We don't spend or we spend very, very less, like probably 10% of the cost on actual acquisition. But there's a specific reason behind it. I mean, Vedantu would not be the right comparison here because we've been there for a long time. And right from day one, we've been very focused on organic, right? So today, if you search for anything on Google around like what a kid searches for, we'll be in the top 2, top 3. If you search anything on YouTube, we'll be there on top 2, top 3. So we have had good enough of time to focus on creating this organic assets, content assets on Google, on YouTube, even on Tata Sky and Airtel. We have exclusive channels of Vedantu. Even on TikTok, we were probably the number 1 in K-12 before it got banned, right? So the idea here has been very clear and very simple. Rather than spending only on paid acquisitions, which is a very honestly very easy way to do it, right? And it gives you instant gratification. But the moment you stop it, you're again zero. So the idea was always to create organic assets. Even today, we always think about how we can create organic distribution channels. And it's been a journey of almost 5 years, 6 years for us to reach here. And as a result of that, today, we don't really spend a lot on acquisition. We spend on conversions, right? And other things, but not on acquisition. And that's probably one of the big moats we have. So today, just to give you numbers, around 35 million unique students come to Vedantu every month organically, right? And that is just Vedantu's web and app. Apart from that, on YouTube, we have 13 million unique students who get to us every month. So these are all things which organically happen. And even if I don't do anything tomorrow, it will still happen, right? So that's a big moat, and that's what really helps us with acquisition.
But when the student is making a choice between the various competitors and Vedantu, and there's nobody physically to explain him, right? How do you differentiate yourself, and how do you retain that when everybody is trying to pull him?
It's a good question. So I think the ultimate proof of the pudding is in the experience. So what we do is, so there are 2 things which happen, Siddharth. One is either he knows it already and he comes from reference, right? So then it's a very easy thing, right? And in education, reference has a huge role to play. So as and when we are scaling, the references also scale. So that's a definite thing. So that is why it's important to give a great experience, because if you do that, one student will actually go and influence 5 others, right? So that's the organic way to do it, right? which also happens in offline. So nothing specific with online there. It is everywhere. The same phenomena works. Apart from that, in online, what we have done specifically is we have made the friction to experience our product least. So it's almost a frictionless experience. You can, as a parent and a student, can actually today download a Vedantu webinar app and can actually go through a live session. It will be happening even right now. You can go and witness it. So there you will see a quality of the teacher. There you will see the content quality and also the platform seamlessness. And we give a lot of these free trial classes, like sessions. So what it does is it creates an experience and a comfort and a knowledge about how Vedantu works. And after that, we have online demos. So parents who would want to, dig in deep and know more details, we have online demonstrations wherein a sales counselor would get into an online demo with a parent and explain the whole thing. So all of this is online. So it's frictionless. You don't have to travel anywhere. You can sit at your home and still go through it. And that's how we are able to scale these things, at a very massive level.
But do you face the heat of the competition, let's say, from your customers or from your investors or from your employees?
See, do we experience competition? 100% yes. It's obviously a very competitive market. And it is not just online. I think the majority of the competition still is offline, because that is where the majority of the parents and students think of going, right? So 100% yes. The answer is 100% yes. Do we internalize it? I mean, at least at Vedantu, the DNA has been very different. We've been very internally focused company and a team right from the beginning. As founders, we always are more internally focused. We believe in simple one thing, Siddharth. If you are able to do best for the child, for the student, if you're able to create a great learning experience and outcome for the child, everything will happen automatically and it's a consequence. It's just that it won't happen immediately. Let's say you won't see that effect in a 1 week or a 1 month time. But if you can continuously be consistent with it, all those references and goodwill will get generated, right? So it's very important to have that orientation that you observe your competitors, you learn from them. There's a lot of stuff which, you can learn from, but don't obsess over them, right? Obsess over your student, like, in other cases, customers, but in our case, students. So we obsess over our students and our customers and just see what is the best we can do for them. Just everything follows. We don't at all think a lot about competition, because ultimately education anyways is not a winner takes all category. And, there's a very large market. So that's the philosophy with which we operate.
And how have you yourself scaled as a founder, right? The difference between Vamsi who was running Lakshya and difference between Vamsi who's running Vedantu, and what are the tools that you have used to scale yourself, build, more strength as a founder over a period of time?
Yeah, yeah, that's a very deep question. So there is a lot which I can talk about that. So I don't even know where to begin. Okay, there's obviously a difference. Lot of it you are cognizant about, lot of it you are not cognizant about, because with exposure you obviously scale. So one thing which I would like to say is you definitely need to scale much more faster and more than your company scale, and it's very important and critical, right? And to be self-aware about that is also very important, because if you are not, then you are being the biggest bottleneck for the growth of your firm, right? And in full awareness, then if you know that, I think it's prudent to probably step aside and maybe let someone else come and do it, because it's very critical and important. So there are functional things and there are non-functional things, especially for the co-founder CEOs, right? That is what comes out, right? So I have seen what the co-founders does best is preserve the ethos and the culture and the philosophy, the bigger purpose, the meaning of the company, and they can do it best. And actually, doing it intentionally, being very deliberate about communicating it, storytelling it for the entire organization, especially when the organization is scaling, is very, very critical. Because as and when more people are coming, the first thing which gets diluted is that, right? So it is purely the founder's responsibility, and specifically this one to do, right? So that is part number one. And you need to, it is not something which a founder needs to learn. It's very inherent and it is in depth, like inside a founder. The only thing is he or she needs to be very deliberate about propagating it, and and storytelling it, and over communicating it, right, inside the organization, right. So that is one part. The other part is the functional part, and that is where the majority of scaling needs to happen, right. And there I would say it is a function of exposure. One is of course self drive, right, that you want to do it, very important. It comes from that self drive. Second is exposure. There's now a lot of other founders who are there at a stage, so meeting them, seeing them working and all that. And third is probably your own investing, your own learning and reflections and taking feedback and learning from it. Yeah. So the lot of these things which I have done, right, and it's been a long journey for me. It's been almost 15 years plus journey for me in this. So today the ecosystem is much more evolved, wherein you can actually go and talk to people, and there are some both formal and informal networks out there which you can derive a lot of value from. Specifically talking about some areas which I've used myself, it's a lot of areas actually. There's not one area which comes to my mind. So I've gotten much better at recruiting talent. Is very, very critical and important. I've also become very good, very good relative to the previous self of mine, not in an absolute sense, but definitely much better at holding people accountable and having those hard conversations, which typically when you start, you're not really good at, or you want to avoid those things and all that, those things. The third is discipline, personal discipline. It's very important. There's so much pressure on your time. You need to know what to say yes and what to say no. And I think the whole system around yourself, creating that support structure in which you're very deliberate about how much time you're spending on your priority areas, right, gets more and more tougher. So there's a lot of discipline has come in, I would say. So now my calendar is really organized well, and so well organized that I'm able to even take time out for myself, for my family, right, for stuff which gives me energy, right, and so on and so forth. So I think everyone works differently. But if you were to ask me and tell me, or if you were to say that, what is one recommendation I would want to give to other entrepreneurs, I would say that rather than time management, focus on energy management is probably one of the biggest learnings I have had, and is something that I would like to tell to every entrepreneur out there. Because time management, you tend to think of it as some kind of a timetable, but isn't the most important thing. Yeah. What is important is energy management. So you need to think about your day and see that what all things are giving you energy, and what all activities are sapping energy out of you. Majority of these things will sap energy, but you need to be also very conscious about what are the things which energize you, and be intentional about filling in those things in your day, or if not day, week. Otherwise burnout will happen, and it is a long-term game. It is a marathon, and you can't afford to just always be in an energy sapping mode. That is simply not sustainable. And that is one of the big learnings, not just and in fact, this is something I teach to all of my leaders as well. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know whether that sufficiently answers your question, but yeah, these are some of the things I remember.
No, thanks a lot. This is very critical, which you shared, right, on how to manage your energies throughout the day, and which results in a compounded effect over a long period of time, whether you are still able to run the marathon or you feel burnt out, right? And many founders are not realizing or being unconscious of this fact, right, tend to go downhill 2 or 3 years, as the pressure keeps on increasing, because there's no easy solution out there, right? The pressure every year is like graduating from class
always
9th to 10th to then boards, then IIT. The pressure keeps on increasing on the founder. So if a founder thinks that Series A funding ho jayegi, then I'll take a vacation. I don't think that happens, right? Or Series E, Vamsi is thinking if I get $100 million in my bank, then I can take a long vacation. That is also not there, right?
Yeah.
Every round or every milestone brings more responsibility on the shoulders of the founder. So thank you, Vamsi. It's been a fantastic session with you. Thank you for so much, for sharing your own personal journey, what worked for you, what didn't work for you, I believe it's really helpful. It's been very helpful for me personally. And I think so many entrepreneurs will benefit from it.
So thanks a lot, Siddharth. I also felt really energized doing this, and great questions. All the best to you, and continue to create inspirations for many more entrepreneurs, because we definitely need more entrepreneurs to do the to do impact at scale in the country. So all the best to you, and glad to be here.
Thanks, Vamsi.